Hi, everybody. If you have a unmuted microphone right now, if you could please mute. This is going to be episode 1 of XenForo Insights. My name is Megan. I'm going to be hosting. For this series, we wanted to be able to share knowledge and best practices. A lot of you might be joining because you're interested in starting a community, or you're already an admin to a community, or you're a community member. We're going to be having team members from XenForo, Audentio, and one day we hope to have others in the community to go over a variety of topics, answer some user submitted questions. Toward the end, we will have a Q&A session. You'll be able to submit your questions in the chat area. We wanted to go over really quickly about why we wanted to do this. Our teams got together. We both do work with online communities. We thought that there was a kind of gap in community strategy. When people do start a community, they sometimes do so with little guidance, or maybe they don't know where to go. And they maybe sometimes hope for the best or hope that it pans out. They might try to find their own resources, maybe go to YouTube, maybe read some how-tos, but we wanted to have a series that starts off with some basics, which we'll cover today, and kind of go from there. Eventually, we hope to have some very technical demos, but we also want to go over some high-level type content and strategies. Hopefully, this will all be useful for people kind of across the board in communities, but specifically, if you're here today, we're going over basics, and it might be great for a beginner admin. So I'm going to introduce everybody. We have Kier, you can see with kind of the pink light. And he is the director and developer with XenForo. We have Gemma, and she is a XenForo moderator. We have Mike, he is the owner of Audentio and a community expert. And we have Victoria, who's the marketing coordinator with Audentio. And me, I'm Megan, I work with Audentio as well. Today, I'm going to be kind of supporting as well as obviously hosting. Gemma and Victoria are also going to be helping in the background, and Mike and Kier are going to be presenting. We hope to discuss today how to set your online community up for success, getting off the ground, and then Kier is going to talk about admin configuration basics and how-tos. He has a fresh install to show us. And then we're going to do Q&A, and I think that's kind of what the schedule is going to look like. Do we feel ready to begin?
Yep, sounds good.
Okay, so we're going to have Kier start with admin configuration basics and how-tos. Kier.
Thanks for that, Megan. I'm going to switch over to share my screen.
Of course.
So I am Kier. I've been, I'm coming up, excuse me, I just need to find the window I'm supposed to be sharing. There's the one. Here we go. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm Kier. I've been coming up on my 20th anniversary writing forum software now, and it's 10 years since XenForo started out. The platform XenForo is incredibly rich, and it's packed with useful tools and features, but while there's a lot of resources out there that can help you find out what various systems do and how they work, there aren't that many that can guide you through how to bring different systems together to achieve a particular goal. So one of the aims of this series is to talk about some common admin tasks and best practices. Of course, there's a huge number of topics we could cover, ranging from basic procedures to really advanced use, but we've got to start somewhere. So today we're going to look at what you should do as an admin immediately following installation. So your server's set up and the software is installed. And so what are the first steps you need to take in getting your community up and running? Here we are with the post-installation screen, where it's going to ask you to set up your first administrator. So bearing in mind that we're live here and anything that can go wrong probably will, let's get started. So when you are asked to create your first user, you can either choose to create a dedicated administrator who is going to do nothing but log into the control panel and do administrative stuff, or you can create a user that is you as well. And when I say that, I mean a user that is going to go onto the front end and post in your name. In this particular case, I'm just going to create a standard admin user who I'm going to use solely for the purpose of going into the control panel. So let's just give it some basic info here, a username and password, and an email address. Now we get into the first page of options. The most important one of these is the board title. This is going to be shown at the top of every single screen on the front end of your community installation. And it's also going to identify any email that is sent out by your community. So it's important to get something descriptive in there. So for this one, let's call it XenForo Insight Demo. The board URL, for the most part, will be intelligently populated based on the URL that you've just done your installation at. So this is my local development server, Signature Spicy, and you can see that it's worked out the board URL based on where I've installed. So I'm going to leave that as is. The contact email address is the address that any communication that is sent directly to the site through the contact us link at the bottom of the public facing pages is going to go, and by default, it's going to use the address that you just gave it for your first admin account. And then the homepage URL is just a link that is going to take users to what you would call your homepage. Now, a quick word about this send anonymous usage statistics checkbox here. If you don't mind leaving that checked, then please do, because it's really useful for us to collect anonymous information about how many installations of various different versions of PHP and MySQL are out there. And then on a periodic basis, we look at that and find out whether or not enough people have gone to a particular version of the server software for us to mandate that for the next release. So for example, we've just gone up to a new version of PHP 7 for XenForo 2.2, which allows us to do all sorts of exciting new things. So if you don't mind leaving that checked, it is completely anonymous, please do, but if not, no worries. Let's go ahead and enter our control panel and log in with the details that we just provided. And from here, let's take a quick look at the administrative UI. There are 4 links at the top here, a home link, which takes us to the page that we're currently looking at. This text link, which will take us to the front end, the public facing side. Let's open that in a new tab and dump it over there for now. And that will be our public facing installation. We've also got this gears icon, which is a shortcut to the setting groups. We also have the ability to show advanced options, which we'll talk about another time. And finally, the quick search icon here, which is really useful for navigating very quickly around the control panel. You can click it, but something that not everybody knows is that you don't even have to click it. If you're in the control panel, you can just press / on your keyboard and start typing, and it will automatically start searching straight away. And from there, we can go and look at my admin user or whatever else we want. Let's head back to the home page and take a quick look at what's here. Statistics for recent activity is obviously empty at the moment because we've only just set up. The server environment report is not useful at the moment, but if you were looking at upgrading to a newer version of XenForo in the future, this would be a one-stop shop to find out if you meet the new requirements. Then we've got logged activity, again, nothing here. The current staff online. And then I just want to have a quick word about these file health check results here. Periodically, the XenForo system is going to scan all of the scripts that make up the software and check that their contents match up to what they were when you first installed. For the most part, that's always going to come back with a successful result. But if you ever find that you don't have a successful result, and you know that you yourself have not edited one of those scripts, then it's worth going and checking to make sure that you haven't had some sort of hacking attempt or something else that could be going wrong on your forum. If you're in doubt, just download the entire XenForo package again and re-upload it. You don't have to do a reinstallation or anything, just overwrite the scripts and your file health check will return true again. So let's move on. Let's go and take a look at our first group of options. The first one I want to talk about is the board active switch. It's a fairly obvious one, but there's a lot of power hidden here. We can use this to turn on and off the public-facing side of the system completely to everyone except those users with administrative privileges. So if I were to turn that off and save it, then this message here is going to be presented to any visitors. Why would you want to do that? Well, you might find that you've just installed a new add-on, or you want to make a change to the forum structure, or you're testing out a new style. All of that is really useful to be tested in private without exposing the changes to the public. So that's your master switch. Next, let's go take a look at some basic options. Now, most of the XenForo options will either be populated with what we consider to be the best option, or they'll be intelligently populated wherever we can, based on the environment that we find ourselves in. So like I talked about, the board URL was based on the URL at which you installed. But this was one that we can't intelligently populate. Just in case your board title is longer than 12 characters, that's not going to fit into very small spaces. So we ask you to provide a board short title. So I'm just going to call this XF demo. It should ideally be less than 12 characters, and we're going to use that in places where we need a very short title, like the label for an icon on a mobile device. Next up, we're going to take a look at board URL canonicalization. Now, I've tried to explain this in various different ways to different people, and it's quite confusing, but it's a really important setting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you what happens if you don't use it. What I've got here is my front end, which is set to this particular URL, and I'm logged in as the admin. Now, if I open a new tab here, and I've got demo.example.com set to point to the same location as here, but you can see that I'm not logged in here. Now, let's just go in here and create a quick thread. Sorry about my typing. Oh dear. Let's create that. And now let's load it here. And now I'm going to take this URL and paste it here. Now, the thread does exist at this location, but if I were to click on this using this particular window here, which is logged in as the admin on the signature spicy domain, and I click on it, you'll see that I'm now not logged in. Why? Because I don't have cookies set for the demo.example.com domain. So that's a very unexpected behavior to find that I've clicked an internal link and it's broken. So what do we do with that? This is where board URL canonicalization comes in. If we find that we have arrived at a page and we are not at the expected URL, it will automatically and transparently rewrite it. So let's try that again now that the option has been saved. And here we are, it's automatically rewritten it to use that URL, and I'm still logged in. Great job. Okay, next. We have these default and contact email addresses. I talked briefly about the contact email address, but the default email address is arguably just as important. This is the email address that is going to be used whenever your community sends out an email. So every notification that you send, every newsletter is going to come from this email address. So if you are not happy with using the email address that came from your administrator account, then this is the place to change it. Let's move on to an option that, in my opinion, is useful to change. I did say that most options come up as the best option, but we have to bear in mind that some people are coming to XenForo as an upgrade or a migration from another forum, and some are starting new communities. If you are starting a new community, I would recommend changing this to new posts. What am I talking about? Well, traditionally, forums have presented their visitors on the top level page with a tree view of the forums. What I mean by that is you have a list of categories, and within each category is a forum, and the forums will generally show the most recent piece of content that has been posted or responded to within that forum. But that's not really the way that today's internet users who are used to Facebook and Twitter and Instagram like to consume their media. They tend to prefer a feed-based approach where the content is exposed all at the top level with the newest content at the top. And so by changing this to the new post approach, that's exactly what it does. When we go to the forums page, it's not going to work for me because I have read the post that I've just created. But if I pretend I'm not that person, then here we are. I get a feed of the most recently posted information. Now, it may not look all that impressive when you start out, but if you're going to follow some of the advice that Mike is going to give in his spot and perhaps seed your forum with some initial content, then this is a much more approachable front page than the tree view is. So I would recommend that if you're starting from fresh, you go with the new post option. Let's move on quickly to the guest time zone here. You'll notice that on the front end, all of the content items are shown with a timestamp. And normally, the most recent stuff will be shown with a relative timestamp, like 3 minutes ago, as it is here. But if we hover over that, you'll see the absolute timestamp that shows the time and date at which content was posted. Now, we have to decide which time zone we're going to use to show that those times. Now, I'm being shown that time in my local time zone because I have an account, but anyone who visits and doesn't yet have an account is going to be shown a time using the time zone that you specify here. So if you know that most of your visitors are from Australia, then use an Australian time zone. Or if for some other reason your community is going to be best served with using a Moscow time zone, then set that instead. Let's move on. The next thing I'm going to talk about very briefly is email options. This is something that you do need to get set up before your board goes live. By default, XenForo is going to send out any email that it needs to send using the PHP built-in mail system. So however you've configured PHP to work on your server, that's how it's going to attempt to send mail. But you may want to change that. You may want to perhaps use a custom SMTP server, or maybe even use some sort of Google server. I'm not going to go into how to do that, but I will show you where to find the information. If you just open up XenForo.com, click on the help link at the top and go to the XenForo 2 manual, then you can very quickly find everything you need to know about setting up the email transport system. Do pay attention to that because it's important that your server can send mail properly. And if you're not going to be using the built-in PHP system, then you need to get that set up quickly. Let's talk about censoring. Pretty much every user-generated content that you accept is going to need to be screened because you don't want to allow any old public member to post any old stuff, because if they post something offensive, then perhaps that's going to negatively affect the reputation of your site. So we have a built-in text censorship system that applies to just about every text that's submitted by users, and it works a bit like this. You enter a term or a word in here. So let's use dig. And what that's going to do by default is it's going to replace dig, D-I-G, with 3 instances of the censorship character, the star there. So dig will be replaced by star, star, star. That at the moment is only going to match the word dig, but I could add a star after it as a wildcard, and now it's going to match digger, and I could match with a star at the front as well, and now it'll match prodigy. You can add as many terms as you want. You can be as specific as you want. But one thing that is quite useful to note is that you can also change the replacement. So if, for example, you didn't want anyone to talk about cows on your site, then you could replace that completely with another term, just because you might want to. Now let's move on to analytics. Google Analytics is used all over the web. It's a great system for analyzing how your visitors are arriving at your site and what they do when they're there. Normally, if you want to integrate Google Analytics on a website, you have to go to the Google site, sign up, and then they will give you an HTML snippet that you then have to somehow integrate onto every single page of your website. XenForo makes that much easier. As soon as you've got the account set up with Google, you just need to grab your analytics property ID, paste it in here and hit save, and we automatically deploy it to every single public facing site, facing page. So you can get started with analytics straight away. I wouldn't even bother to read about it. Just go and do it, paste it in there and get started. Let's talk about user registration, because you're not going to get any interest in your board unless you have some users there. So the master switch for registration is here. You can turn that on and off. If you have a closed membership, if you want to manually create your users, that's the master switch. But the next set of options here are all about preventing robot registrations. Spam is an endless problem on the internet. And if you can prevent spammers from registering, then so much the better. So the first line of defense here, after you've gone through the on-page protection mechanisms for registration, would be to enable email confirmation. What this does is, after a user has successfully completed the on-page registration process, it will then send an email to the email address that they've provided, and they will have to click a link within that to validate their registration before they will actually get promoted to an active user. If you have a particular problem with robot users, and perhaps you don't have a particularly active membership that's not registering hundreds of accounts every day, then you might even switch to manual approval. And with that, it will prevent anyone from being progressed to a full user until you actually manually approve their registration. I would just point out that there is no automated system to complete that. So if you do enable that, you need to make sure that you're checking the control panel fairly regularly to make sure that you are actually approving your users. Otherwise, everyone's going to get very annoyed and leave your site. Moving down the registration options, we have the new user welcome option. So it's quite often overlooked, but it's really, really useful. It's a system that allows you to send an automated message to new signups to introduce them to how your site works, to generally say hello. And you can even personalize it slightly with some tokens. So you can either send them a welcome conversation, which is the built-in XenForo direct message system, or you can send them an email. So let's just take a quick look at the conversation option. You could send an additional, you could send this to multiple participants. So if you wanted to introduce a user to your staff, for example, you could include them in the list here. You give it a title, and then in the message, you can include these little tokens like name and email and ID to personalize that message so it feels a little bit less like an automated canned response. Now, let's carry on and talk about some message options, which you'll find in here. Now, there are two systems in here that are kind of advanced, and I would recommend that perhaps you turn them off if you are starting a new community. And those are this multi-quote and select quote option. Multi-quote is a fairly complex but very powerful system that allows you to, or allows your users to mark particular messages and then press another button to quote each one of those messages. But it adds an additional control onto the post interface. And for a new community where people are not necessarily totally au fait with what quoting is all about, I would just turn it off and then maybe debut it in a few months' time as a new feature. The same with select quote, very nice feature, but you're confusing things for your new members. So if you have a membership that is new to forums, then maybe leave those two off for the time being. Let's move down to Giphy. Giphy is a new feature for XenForo 2.2, and if you're familiar with the Giphy service, it allows your users to post animated images of memes or whatever else that it is that they want to spice up their messages. But in order to use that, you're going to need to head over to the Giphy developer dashboard, create an account, and get yourself a key. We can't do that for you. You must do that on your own. But if you go and get that, then turn it on, paste it in here, and suddenly the Giphy system will work. Finally, on this page, I'm going to talk briefly about the image and link proxy. Throughout the history of forums, as soon as BB code was invented and the image tag came about, people have been linking remote images into their posts on forums. That's great. It's a feature that's lasted the test of time. But it has the distinct problem that you are relying on an external server for content that is on your site. Why is that a problem? Well, because you don't know that tomorrow that remote server isn't going to shut down and suddenly all the images that it's been providing for your forum will disappear and you'll end up with broken content all over your forum. So the image proxy will help with that by intercepting any hot linked images that your users post and slurping the content onto your server so that it can be served directly from your site. That does have a cost in terms of the amount of bandwidth that you're going to be expending and the amount of storage that you're going to eat up. But for the sake of not having broken links, it's well worth doing. It also has the benefit that if you're serving this stuff, then you can run analytics on it. You can view logs of what's being served and what's not. And it's generally just a really useful feature. Now, having talked about hot linked images, let's talk about images that are intentionally uploaded to your server. And not just images, but any old files. This is the attachment system. And you're going to need to tailor this to the needs of your community and the capabilities of your web server. The first thing to look at is the maximum attachment size, which is by default set to just 1 megabyte, but you can extend that up to as much as your server can take. Now, we do note in the description here the maximum amount that your server is configured to allow using the PHP ini upload max or some other configuration variable that PHP uses. So you can't go higher than the figure that is listed here. But if you've got bandwidth to burn and plenty of storage, you could go right up to that limit. Moving down, we have the maximum attachment image dimensions. If you want to limit the size of images that are uploaded to your forum, then you can enter some dimensions here and the XenForo system will automatically resize those images down if an image that is over the limits that you've put in here is uploaded. That will have a penalty in terms of the work that your server has to do, because resizing images is not the easiest thing in the world. But it will have the benefit of smaller storage use and smaller bandwidth, because you won't be serving the big images. And finally, on this page, the image attachment thumbnail dimensions. We do produce a small version of each image that's uploaded. And we base the image size. This is something that has actually changed with XenForo 2.2 on the smallest dimension. So if you upload a very wide image that's only this big, then we're actually going to resize it based on the short dimension because of the new square attachment display that we show on the front end. I would mention that an increasing number of visitors are going to be using high DPI or retina screens. So the 150 pixel size here is the size on screen of those attachments. But if you want the very best quality, I would double that so that people with high DPI screens see a full resolution version. Let's talk quickly about spam management. Spam is the bane of everyone's existence, and there are plenty of tools in XenForo to help you get around it. The first thing to talk about is the Stop Forum Spam database. It's a brilliant collaborative system that allows everyone to contribute their spam finds for the benefit of everyone else who's using it. Now, if you want to be a really good citizen, then go over to the Stop Forum Spam site, sign up for a key and enter it here. And what will happen then is that anytime you encounter a spammer and do something about it, your server will then contact Stop Forum Spam and report that spammer for you. It's a great system. I would recommend that everyone does it. Project Honeypot is something very similar. It's a collaborative database of spam information. And again, you can contribute back to that if you go and get a key from their website using the link in here. And moving down, we have the mother of all anti-spam systems, Akismet. Again, we can't give you an API key for that. You're going to have to go and get one yourself. But Akismet is a great system for identifying spam based on the actual content that is submitted. It will give each piece of content a score depending on how spammy it feels. And if you want to benefit from that system, you're going to need to go over to the Akismet site, sign up for a plan, which range from very expensive to free, depending on your needs, paste your key in there, and that's it. The integration is done for you. You can start benefiting from it straight away. That, in essence, is your first steps before you can start moving on to actually setting up your site. So I hope this has been useful with a little intro into the way that some of these important settings work. Next time, we'll talk about something a little more advanced for the benefit of people who are already up and running. But for now, that's it for me.
Thank you so much, Kier. That was incredibly useful. I want to reiterate that we're going to be posting this somewhere publicly in the coming weeks so that you can reference this unless you've memorized everything that Kier said. And then I also want to reiterate that if you could please submit any questions that you have, either in QA or in chat, we will be answering those after Mike's spot, which is now. Mike is going to be talking about getting off the ground and elaborating a little bit more on what Kier said and sharing some new things for you. So, Mike.
Thanks. Thanks, Megan. And thanks, Kier. So, hey, everybody. My name is Mike. I've been a member of the XenForo community since essentially day one. I've been a member of the forum administrator and community manager community since I was a kid. And, you know, I think once I found XenForo, I kind of fell in love and I never left. So it's a privilege to be here today to kind of help, you know, new community managers or people that may be interested in XenForo, you know, help them get off the ground. And that's kind of what we're going to do for episode 1. Now, I know a lot of you are administrators and may have been with XenForo as well since the beginning. So I think as we do new episodes, you know, we'd love to hear about particular points of interest or topics that you'd like to see from myself and probably more importantly, Kier or Mike or Chris or whoever from the community, other resource developers, systems administrators, whoever that might be. I think we'd love to make this, well, a community-driven initiative. And so, you know, I think for today, my goal here is to just kind of show you a couple things about the XenForo software, and you know, some of the things that are worth noting maybe before you start getting very deep into the weeds, so to speak. I mean, XenForo is such a robust software. I mean, it's much more than just a software. It's an entire platform framework. And so I find that a lot of people kind of get stuck up on, you know, too many add-ons or playing with permissions or too many forum nodes or not exactly knowing what is the most critical things to be focusing on. So for about 15-20 minutes, I'll just cover some of that. And I'd love to hear any questions or anything in the future. So I guess what I'll do from here is I'll go ahead and share my screen. So here we go. So the first thing I'm going to show is well XenForo.com. It's where you jump off in your journey with using XenForo. So obviously, if you're looking to buy the license, check the pricing page at the top. If you're looking for, certain questions, there's a pre-sales area on the community. You could also probably just, reach out through email or creating a ticket or however. The XenForo staff is amazingly insightful and helpful in getting you started. I'd also recommend that by the way, Kier added the help link here at the top here recently, which is very nice. I highly recommend that, even before purchasing, potentially take a look at some of these features. There's so many to go through, much more than we'll be able to cover in a single episode today. Also, XenForo is a distributed software, so at least currently. I know Kier has some information about that maybe in the future, in a future episode, so you guys should definitely check out some of the future options XenForo might be offering. But for now, if you need help getting started with a server or anything, I highly recommend reaching out to XenForo again or using the community. Right here at the top is the community. Now you must have be a licensed member to use some of the areas of the community, but there's amazing, server administrators and just the community as a whole who can help you kind of get started. So I'll cover the community maybe a little bit more at the end here. But for now, I think what I'll do is I'll go ahead and show an example demo. So Kier kind of had an example demo started already. This is just a stock XenForo, more or less out of the box. So once you have this set up, again, assuming you had help from XenForo or you talk to your host, a typical host will help you get set up. They should give you something that looks like this on installation. So I've already got a username and password set up here. So I'll go ahead and log in. So let me go ahead and show you the admin panel, which is what, again, Kier was going over. I'll log in again. So yeah, I think one of the interesting things about XenForo is that we all kind of come from different levels of experience, expertise, technical capability, engineering ability. Some of us are community managers who know a lot about the psychology of communities. Other us are engineers, designers, developers, things like that. And XenForo is a great tool for really all those people. So the voice I'm going to be speaking from today is just probably someone, again, newer. And I think one of the first things you want to do as a newer member of the XenForo space or using the XenForo software is I always just recommend skimming the navigation, getting familiar with the administrative control panel. This is kind of your domain, right? This is kind of your way of, really getting comfortable with the software. There are a lot of features and a lot of tools. And I find just simply, starting with, going through these lists, kind of seeing what these are. If there's something that you don't understand, check the help section, check the community, but just really kind of skim some of these features. I think that's just kind of like I guess, a way of getting comfortable, settling down into the software. And I think, Kier kind of covered a lot of the different setup. And I think in future episodes, we'll cover things like add-ons and communicating with your members, maybe some themes and front-end design work, some of the ideal and best practices. But today, what is like one of the first things you can do when you get set up? And what I like to do is I like to start with familiarizing with kind of the foundation of a community. And that's your users, right? That's your users and the user groups. So be that looking at custom user profiles, custom user fields, be that, setting up a couple sample users or inviting friends and family or whomever, looking at the user group system. These are one of the best places to start. And so let me start as well by covering, I guess, a couple of the default user groups that XenForo comes with by default. These are where your users kind of get funneled into. They get funneled into these little groups depending on, I guess, what type of permission and what kind of status, I guess, they hold in your community. Some of these kind of go without saying, but there's the unregistered, unconfirmed, or guest user group. This is kind of the formal definition of all the guests, and you can actually customize what your guests see. If you don't want them to see content, right? Or if you don't want them to be able to post, or you do want them to be able to post, or whatever those permissions are, you could do so here. Registered is, goes without saying again, but anybody who's actually registered for your community. and the administrative and moderating user groups are for your staff members. One quick note is that the way XenForo handles moderators and administrators is actually through a separate system. I think there were some security issues with other software perhaps, and I think XenForo kind of looked at it as if you're gonna add an administrator, you should do so in very deliberately and intentionally. So if you click the administrator link here, you can actually add other administrators, and same for moderators. We'll probably cover moderator permissions and admin stuff another day. But so if I go here to the registered group, you'll see kind of the default. And my recommendation is to kind of skim some of these permissions. This is kind of like what I like to think is the foundation of what your users can do. Especially because everybody who's registered, even administrators, everybody should really live inside this grouping of a registered user. So anything that you want them to be able to do, viewing, using permissions or using the reaction system within XenForo potentially, and I think there's also an override button for that, right? But whatever functions or permissions you want, quickly skim these. Another good idea is to maybe set up some of those user groups. Like, so a lot of communities, I think they have like, a premium user group, right? Let's say you want to have a private area in your site that's just for kind of exclusive content. I think one of the best things to do is kind of set up that permission. So anyways, so all I've done so far is I clicked add user group and I clicked, let's say a premium user group here. I talked about user banner styling, which would be right here. This is what shows up under their post bit. And again, these are the list of permissions. Sorry, I think it was on the wrong screen. Again, there's a lot of these permissions. And again, I recommend just kind of quickly skimming some of these. But what I was talking about on the other screen was the bypass flood or bypass spam. A registered user or a premium user, sorry, is somebody who you probably trust. They probably paid some amount of money to gain access to your community. So you may want to choose, maybe they can edit their own user title. Maybe they can upload avatars and other users can't. And this is kind of where you want to do that. And you want to opt into some of those features as opposed to, setting them kind of more haphazardly. It'll keep your permission set, kind of really clean. And again, I can talk at length about all the different permissions. Maybe I think permissions is probably worth its own video on its own, really. But yeah, in general, just keep user permissions, simple. That's one of the first things that I recommend you doing. Again, setting up your groups, maybe going to users, creating a new user, adding some users, inviting friends and family to kind of get started, anybody who you might know. They'll really kind of help you understand the power of XenForo and help you understand kind of how you want to set up your community. So another thing, I guess, that you might want to do is set up your content structure. And you can do so under the forum section and nodes. In Kier's presentation, he mentioned how there's a difference between forums and new posts under the options for what the default feed for the user can be. For those of you who kind of are more familiar with node structures or folder structures for discussions, you may want to keep that as forums depending. And these are where you decide what those are. And I think you need to have at least one or two by default, right? So XenForo nicely comes with a category node and a forum node. And there's other nodes, especially in XenForo 2.2, many different kinds of forums, which I don't think I have here to show today. But so what I like to do at least is I like to kind of rename these categories. So I might have like a members category, and maybe I have an introductions forum. And maybe what I also might do is have and go ahead and create a node. And if you want it to be somewhere where someone talks and can create threads and posts, use the forum one by default. And again, XenForo 2.2 has a lot more options here. But I might create something like a general chat or general discussion. Depending on what your niche is, you'll obviously want to create very niche specific discussions as well. So when you create a forum, there's a description. This would show up in the node list and other areas like the forum view itself. You can choose the parent if you want to kind of nest and organize your discussion topics. And there's a whole wide range of options that I definitely recommend you skim. And again, I default to XenForo kind of has really good defaults. So if you aren't super comfortable with what they do, just go ahead and skip them, and it should kind of get you where you want. So actually, let me move this under the parent of members. So now if I go back to my front end here and I refresh, you'll see I've got this members area, introductions, and general chat. And I know this might seem like it's too few, and obviously, you know, if you have a niche, some type of niche, you'll want to have at least one node just for that niche, you know, very on-topic discussion. But again, if you're not super familiar, that's maybe one place where I would recommend you stop even, at least until you know what you need and what you don't need. So nodes also come with their own permissions. So just like user groups have their own permissions of what you can and can't do, so too do nodes. So for example, if I wanted to do a node that's private, let's do a quick example. What I might do here, let me go to forums nodes. Let me go ahead and create a private node. So this will be a node that only my premium user groups can see. So this will be premium members only. Go ahead and skip everything just for the purposes of the demo. I'll skip that. What you want to do is you want to click this permissions link right here. And what I like to do is I like to select private. So now it's private. Nobody can see. If I go back here, even as an administrator, it doesn't show up for me. Let me go ahead and create that user group as well. User group. I'll just call it the premium user group. Maybe get them a nice green banner. I'll leave everything by default for now. And then what I want to do is I want to go back to my my form list here, my nodes, click the permissions, and then you'll see the list of user groups, all the available user groups here. What I want to do is I want to click on the premium user group and just select yes here, view node. And you don't really want to start giving very unique individual permissions for that node. I mean, you may want to, but you may want to do so very intentionally. If it says inherit, it's going to use the default permission set for that user group or for the nodes in general. So you'll probably want to leave inherit by default unless you have a very specific reason why you wouldn't want something to be done, like editing or posting or something like that. So I'll go ahead and click save. And now if I go back, I still shouldn't be able to see it, because I'm not a member of that premium user, the premium user group. So what you want to do now is you want to go to the users. You can also use the / command or the search command like Kier showed us. You can also just click list all users. And another, nice feature, XenForo knew I only had one member, so it automatically loaded me in. So this is my default user here. I think I need to set a password here. So then if I scroll down here, you'll see user group and secondary user groups. Now, what I see a lot of different communities do is they might go ahead and do that, right? And the problem with that is that all those base permissions, the things that you want all your users to have by default, aren't, though you don't have kind of a model of controlling what that is if you do it this way. So my recommendation, I think Kier's and most people who've worked with XenForo, they recommend leaving all your default user groups to registered, and then instead selecting the premium group or whatever secondary group, well, as the secondary user group.
Yeah, absolutely. I would always recommend that your user groups are as light as possible, so that you have really focused purposes for each user group. But if your user is registered, leave them registered.
Right. Absolutely. So now all I have to do is just tick this box here. And again, we can cover a lot of these other settings at a later date, but I've just checked the premium box there, click save. And if I go back, I now gain access to that premium members only feature. And I think if you see kind of the way I did it, or at least a logical kind of way I processed how to do something like that, I actually kind of checked the least amount of boxes possible. And the reason that's, I guess, helpful is because when your community grows, which it inevitably will, you'll kind of have a good foundation of how you set things up, and things won't start to get messy. And it's okay if they do, right? There are ways to clean it up, but I think with good practice and just awareness of kind of how XenForo works, you'll be able to kind of keep your permission sets and your really core data structures, things like forums and users and user groups, very, very clean moving into the future. So that was kind of a quick little tutorial here for today. I think I want to just cover a little bit more about the XenForo community. So I'm going to go back over to XenForo.com, click on the community, and I just want to briefly talk about this. So I've been a member of this community for very, very long time, and it's just one of the best places for people like you, community managers, administrators, server administrators, to kind of offer some help or guidance to you if you have questions. So I recommend using the pre-sale questions if you're interested in buying. troubleshooting and problems. If you're a customer and you have some type of question that you're stuck on, I highly also recommend checking out the resources area on XenForo. There's just a wealth of very talented developers and designers that there might be a particular piece of functionality that you might need. You might want to check there. And again, that the help docs and various things that Kier mentioned are very, very valuable. So I hope that's kind of a good synopsis of how to get started, and I guess I'll pass it on back to Megan.
Awesome, thank you so much, Mike. That was very helpful. Again, we're going to share this in the future. Up next, we'd like to do Q&A. I shared Bill's question. Why would someone not use, I've never even seen this word before today, canonicalization? Is that right?
Canonicalization.
And since Kier, that was asked during yours, if you could answer that one.
So that's an interesting question, because logic would suggest that if there is a truthful URL for a piece of content, then that is absolutely where it should exist. The reason that it's there and it's not set by default is that there are all sorts of configurations where perhaps you have different URLs or different domains that point to different areas of your forum in order to make a single installation look like a sort of multi-domain family of forums, although they're all sharing a single user database. And in those particular instances, being able to address different content with different URLs and not actually use the board URL as the be all and end all can be quite useful. There are a handful of other instances where canonicalization is not desirable, but they are few and far between. So generally speaking, I would suggest that you do turn it on. The other reason that's just occurred to me why we don't turn it on by default is that if you mess up your board URL, which is actually easy to do if you've done an installation through the command line rather than doing it through the web browser, so it doesn't know what your it can't derive your URL from the installation, then you could find that it's almost impossible to actually view any of your content. So we leave it turned off just to make sure that everything is good before you then turn it on, and hopefully everything's good.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kier. I'm going to keep moving forward with the ones that everyone submitted today. And then if we have time, we can move on to some previously submitted ones. And I wanted to also note that we got so many questions submitted about monetization that we're going to probably do an entire episode, or at least an entire segment in a future episode about that. But next up is another user submitted question. I'm not sure if this is Rudd or Rude, but please feel free to unmute during your question if you'd like to. But this question says, question for Kier. Is it possible to change the default forum page, so forums/new posts, by users themselves?
As far as I'm aware, no, that's not currently an option. The notion of changing it by default is really for people who are landing on your site with no prior experience, because for someone who is already a registered member, then I would suggest they just set a bookmark to whatever they prefer to be their landing page, and then whenever they click on their bookmark, they'll get there. So this is really only for new arrivals at your forum that you would change the default behavior.
I think there is an extension or an add-on in the marketplace that does it, just in case. I might have to find it.
We have one more question that was submitted. I believe this is the last one. It says, about proxy images. Does or can that have legal ramifications? Think copyright law.
I can maybe take that one, because
Sure.
I've run into that a couple times. There is something called, what is it?
Fair use.
XIF, or it's like metadata on images. In different sites like Getty, or different owners of content, Getty, and which I think they own, like iStock Photo, and a lot of the stock images on even Windows, right? I've had them reach out. I've had Ferrari reach out. I've had a couple organizations reach out just because a community member uploaded an image to the forum. So I think this is definitely a problem as your community grows and gets larger. You will definitely want to look at you know, the reasonable legal risk of having people upload images of varying degree to your site. Some sites will try to remove that. Excuse me, I can't remember the term, but it's was it EXIF data on an image?
It is
or something?
EXIF, yeah.
Yeah, so they'll try to remove that because some of the bots on the internet, lawyer bots will try to kind of skim the internet for some of these images and see if they can kind of get a gotcha moment because you're not supposed to use that image on your site without a license. So there definitely are legal ramifications. I've run into them, a couple of times, but on a smaller community, it's really not something that I've seen to be that big of a deal. Obviously, consult your own legal, authority or consultation, but I think it should be mostly fine to use.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I would like to move on to some questions that were previously submitted, presumably by some of the people that are here today. It looks like question 1 is how to address toxicity, cyberbullying, and trolling. And I think that if Mike, that's okay with you, that's a good one for you to answer or start with.
Definitely, yeah. So I mean, as we all know, right, the internet is I guess even an increasingly more weird place, right? And if you happen to get some type of bullying or toxic behavior, which I think is arguably just inevitable, I think you always want to treat it, carefully. I always recommend that new communities or even just existing communities kind of pause and write out or at least glance at if they already have one, glance at their rules, their terms of service, their member guidelines. Make sure that you have something in place and make sure that you're kind of clear on what type of content you allow and do not allow. At least then you have a precedent for whenever situations like toxicity or bullying do arise. I think one of the biggest problems I see is that somebody's being a little bit of, crude, and the administrator chooses to ban them outright. And the problem with that is you sometimes are creating an enemy for yourself, and they will come back and try to create trouble for you. So I always find that being diplomatic with each member is the best thing that you can. Obviously, we all have limited times and schedules, busy schedules. But XenForo has this really cool feature, maybe we'll cover it in a future episode, called the discouragement feature. I think that's what it's called. And it's one of my secret favorites because if you happen to have somebody who is causing trouble, you've asked politely maybe to have them curb that behavior, and they haven't, you can kind of discourage them from being a member on the community by messing with how long the site takes to load, and it's just a great feature. I recommend checking it out. But before you even have to get to that, I think messaging the member and trying to communicate that behavior is not okay. So most times, as long as they're getting a little bit of attention and they know that they're being taken seriously, they might curb that behavior. There is also the warning system within XenForo and the banning system, also something we could talk at length about. I just always recommend caution when using those systems, just because, again, if done so, I guess, without the proper amount of thought or planning, you could be creating more trouble for yourself.
That creation of online enemies is something that is really easy to fall into and really difficult to get out of. So if there is a diplomatic solution to deal with problematic users, then always take that rather than reaching for the nuclear option straight away. Ramp up your response in response to the behavior, and do what's appropriate. But if there's any way to deal with it in a discussion rather than reaching for the tools, then do that first. But the tools are all there if you need them eventually.
Nice. Thank you, guys. That's a good strategy. I think I'm going to move on to one more previously submitted question, and then I think we might have time to get to Julian's question as well. It looks like this next question is using XenForo for something besides a forum. So Mike and Kier probably both have input on this. Kier, if you maybe want to start, get the ball rolling.
I'm sorry, I was just reading Julian's question. Could you just
Oh,
pose?
no worries.
Just,
It's this user wants to know how to use XenForo for something besides a forum.
So I think, and this is kind of starting to deal with Julian's question as well. The essential structure of the board with a collection of containers inside it, and then more and more encapsulation until you get down to the notion of a post, lends itself to all manner of different content types. So we've started to do that with forum types, and you know, we've opened up the question type and the article type, but almost every content type that is on the internet right now is fundamentally this notion of original content with replies or comments. So I think the imagination is the only limit, really, to presenting the information that you've got or the content you've got in whichever way you see fit. There's no limit within the XenForo framework to the ways in which you present it. I don't know if that's actually answering the question, but I think it's a start.
I mean, just as an example, I once built an entire like esport tournament platform on XenForo. We didn't even use the forum except for like support, right? I mean, XenForo is just an amazing. I mean, I think it's sometimes underappreciated how well thought out a lot of these features are, and how organized and easy to extend it is. That it is indeed a framework in and of itself. So a lot of developers, I think, have flocked to it because of that. Because of that level of control and stability. So yes, it is absolutely possible to use XenForo without focusing on the forum aspect of it. I've done it many times before.
Nice. I hadn't thought of those, so that's awesome.
A little anecdote that I'll share was that when Mike Sullivan and I were starting out with the XenForo framework, we didn't actually know that it was going to be a forum. We started out building an application framework, and it was only when we were several months in that we decided that actually forum software is what we know. And so the notion of the forum was kind of our first application, but we always intended XenForo to be a much wider application framework.
Nice. I do believe we have one last user submitted question for today, and then I think we'll wrap and save any other content for future episodes. But we have Julian submitted, probably directed at the XenForo team. It says, has the XenForo team thought about new and innovative ways to present different information in a forum? The thread types is a great move ahead, but some admins think that forums are outdated. And if we want to save this for a future episode, I think that's perfectly fine as well. But otherwise, if we want to maybe start touching on it, that's also fine.
I can take if you want, Kier, or you can, or whatever.
Yeah, you go ahead, and I'll jump in if I've got anything to offer.
Yeah, so I mean, I think there is a little bit of truth to like even the term forum being a little bit ambiguous to some users, especially younger audiences, right? Even the term thread is a little bit unfamiliar, even though, you know, even on Facebook comments or Instagram comments, you know, some users will refer to it as the thread. But there are other terms that I think social media has popularized that have made, I guess, forums feel like they are a little bit unfamiliar. But I mean, the data structure, the underlying data structure is the same as whatever social media is using. It's just some of the terminology and the way it's presented can be a little bit different. You know, forums have always been, I think, a way to help get real discussions going, not so much short form comments or chat, even though there are plenty of tools for that to add those to your forum. But to say that it is, I guess, outdated, I think is not really necessarily accurate. I think communities in general are much more than a forum now. They're much more than just threads. They are contests, and they are in-person meetups. They are webinars. They are lots of different things that make for a strong community. But a forum software, at its core, it has to have a way to ask questions and post questions. And in that way, I think, XenForo goes far above and beyond, I guess, what that needs to be for a foundation. I just think that people are used to the old days where you only needed a thread and you had a successful community. These days, there's just so many other ways to engage with people on the internet that, as a community manager, you will want to look to do more than just have a place to ask questions.
I think I'll touch briefly on the notion that forums are outdated. I think the term itself, as you touched on, is definitely outdated, and we're moving much more to starting to refer to community than to forums or to boards, which is even more antiquated. But fundamentally, the actual paradigm of what a forum does in terms of creating a space for a collection of people to discuss a particular topic and keep a permanent record of that discussion that is rediscoverable and searchable. I don't think anything else comes close to what forums, such as they are, currently offer. So back in 2006, I thought that there couldn't possibly be an ongoing market for forums, and I started taking steps to move the software that I was working on at the time away from the forum model. But since then, there really hasn't been any sign of forums slowing down. So although I think some of the terminology needs to adapt, I think that the actual fundamental essence of forums still has a very important place in today's internet.
Absolutely. And just to even add one more thing, I mean, there are so many projects going on right now, so many new XenForo projects, people coming to XenForo all the time. I think I think if you're an administrator and you think that, your forum isn't working, my recommendation is just, try to think outside the box a little bit, look at your industry a little bit and see what they're doing. But like you said, I mean, a way of searching for content, having it be rediscoverable. I think XenForo will always continue to innovate, and community managers will always have to innovate a little bit. But I mean, forums are not going anywhere. Like I said, if anything, maybe the term is. But I mean, I think just from what I've seen in the last few years, it's growing. And in fact, what's interesting too is I went to college to leave forums because I was reading all the posts and I said, forums aren't going anywhere. I mean, I've never been busier than I am these days, and it's just all due to people starting new forums or growing their existing forum or whatever that is. So I think people are often, it's interesting. I said, I think people might be even looking for a change from social media due to all the different things going on with Facebook and data and social issues and whatnot. And forums are kind of a great way to get people just like you in one particular platform.
Awesome. Thank you guys both so much. That was all for Q&A. So I think that's all for the webinar. For any questions that we didn't answer that were previously submitted, we do have those still, and we do plan on touching on most of those. Like I said, a lot about monetization, understandably. Everybody who is here today, we're going to be emailing you a survey. It would be so appreciated if you could just give us any tidbits, any feedback about what you thought worked, what you thought didn't, anything else that you'd like to see in future episodes. And we're going to be posting this video somewhere, probably XenForo at least, probably our Audentio website as well. And yeah, I think that's it for episode 1, and we hope to see you all at episode 2 and 3 and 4.
Yeah, it was fun. Thanks, everybody.